5-Minute Habits for Healthy Living. This week's habit is called Slow Down. Hello, this is Dr. Brian Morris, and welcome to 5-Minute Habits for Healthy Living, where you will learn the tools to practice a healthy lifestyle 5 minutes at a time. Life has become very complicated with a seemingly endless amount of health information at our fingertips. How do you know what to believe and what not to believe? On this podcast, I will sort through the maze of healthcare information and distill it into easy-to-digest, time-tested, evidence-based practical habits. I've been practicing internal medicine for 20 years. I went to medical school at Johns Hopkins. I trained at Yale, and I previously held a teaching position at Harvard Medical School. I currently practice medicine and hold a teaching appointment at UCLA Medical School here in Los Angeles, where I teach these habits to medical students, house staff, doctors, and of course, to my patients. Before we get to this week's habit, I'd like to remind you that the information contained in this podcast and at 5minutemd.com is intended solely for educational purposes and should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any health condition or illness. This information may not apply to a specific health situation and is not a substitute for medical care by a qualified, licensed, board-certified healthcare professional. Please consult with your healthcare provider before implementing any of the ideas in this podcast or making any changes in your healthcare regimen. This week's habit is slow down. This week's habit is going to be fairly brief, but still very important. The key to this habit is very simple, but it is a very profound tool in avoiding overeating and overconsuming calories. Slow down. Things have gotten faster and more complicated, haven't they? With the 24-hour news cycle and with access to the internet at our fingertips, no matter where we are, life moves so quickly. One byproduct of all this speed is that we also move faster. We talk a little faster, we walk a little faster, we also eat a little faster. Why is this important? It is important because it turns out that the faster we eat, the more we eat. In one fascinating study, researchers gave patients either 10 minutes or 30 minutes to eat a meal. Common sense tells us that if we have an extra 20 minutes to eat a meal, we'll probably eat more food. However, that's not what these researchers found. They found that people ate 10% more calories when they had 10 minutes to eat versus when they had 30 minutes to eat. They found this result because when we eat quickly, we tend to overeat. When we only have 10 minutes to eat, we actually tend to eat more food and more calories than we might if we had 30 minutes to eat and were able to eat in a more relaxed fashion. I teach my patients to remember the 20-minute rule. It takes about 20 minutes for our brains to sense that we're full. So if we eat an entire meal in only about 10 minutes, which is unfortunately the length of the average American meal, then our brain never has enough time to sense a feeling of fullness and tell us to stop eating. We're much more likely to overeat well beyond our needs. Thus, if we eat quickly, we're responding to the taste of the food rather than what our bodies truly need. On the other hand, if we slow down and give our bodies the time to sense that we're full, we begin to gain a closer awareness of our internal cues that tell us that we've eaten enough and that it's time to stop. How can we slow down the eating process? Well, there's lots of easy ways to do this. We can keep our attention on thoroughly chewing our food. We can cut our food into small pieces and then eat one small piece at a time. We can use chopsticks instead of utensils. Believe it or not, in one study, participants ate 30% fewer calories when they used chopsticks instead of utensils. We can eat an apple before a meal. In one study, patients who had an apple before the biggest meal of the day ended up eating almost 200 fewer calories with that meal, including the apple, because it takes time to eat the apple, and that time slowed down the participants in the study and made it easier to control portion sizes. In addition, chewing itself reduces appetite and slows down the eating process, so chewing a food like an apple is particularly helpful at reducing portion sizes and calorie consumption. The goal is to slow down the eating process and get closer to the 20-minute mealtime goal or even longer. Doing so will make it far easier to control our portions and keep our daily calorie intake in line. Let's keep the dialogue going. Let me know what you think of this week's habit for healthy living. Post your comments and your experiences on the 5-Minute MD Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter at Brian Morris MD and visit us anytime at 5minutemd.com. Let your friends know about the podcast and make sure that you are subscribed on iTunes. When you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, you will receive new podcast episodes as soon as they are posted. Also, we will be posting bonus podcast episodes at 5minutemd.com, including special podcast episodes not available on iTunes or YouTube. If you're finding the information on this podcast helpful, you may want to check out these episodes as well. And lastly, if you have a few minutes, stop on by iTunes and leave our podcast a review. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to make today count. I will see you at the next 5.